My name's David. I'm 46, and I used to think I understood betrayal. I thought I'd seen the worst of it when my own father cut me out of his will in favor of my younger brother. But what my wife pulled on me made that look like a warm-up. We lived in Asheville, North Carolina, our little slice of stability in an otherwise chaotic world. I've been working as a regional sales manager for a medical supplies company, raking in good money, but with long hours. That's when I decided to take a step back, a pay cut even, to pursue a business of my own. I was tired of selling someone else's dream. She called me selfish, said I was jeopardizing our family's future, that I was throwing everything away for some fantasy. But I was trying to build something real, something for us. A month later, on our anniversary of all days, she served me divorce papers. Said she was done waiting for me to become the man she wanted, the man she claimed she needed. That would have been bad enough. But 2 weeks later, I found out she'd already moved in with another man, some tech startup guy from Charlotte, the kind who drove a Tesla and wore loafers without socks. She claimed it just happened, that they'd reconnected by chance. Sure, here's where it gets funny, if you can call it that. About a year into my new business, it started to take off. More than take off. I was making more money than I ever had as a sales manager. She must have been keeping tabs because suddenly she's showing up at my doorstep with this fake ashamed look on her face, saying she made a mistake, saying she wanted to try again. But here's the twist. When she left me, she didn't just leave for another man. She emptied our joint accounts, maxed out the credit cards, and left me in a financial mess. And that wasn't even the worst part. I remember sitting at the kitchen table the morning after she'd left, our anniversary dinner plans still mocking me from the calendar, her voice echoing in my head about how I'd failed her. I couldn't even focus on the empty bank accounts, the unpaid bills piling up, the mortgage slipping into arrears. All I could think about was the gall it took for her to walk away, not just from me, but from the life we'd built. It wasn't just the money. It was the way she pretended I didn't exist. Like the years of partnership, the years of long nights and shared dreams had never happened. Like I was just a placeholder until she found something shinier. I tried to tell myself it was over, to let her go, but then I found something that twisted the knife a little deeper. Buried in the pile of unopened mail she used to sort through before she stopped caring, I found a bank statement. A statement for an account I hadn't known existed. And that account, it had her name and that other guy's name on it. Joint. She hadn't just moved in with him. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. That's when I realized she wasn't crawling back because she missed me. She was crawling back because her new life wasn't working out. Because her fancy man from Charlotte had left her holding the bag. And now, she thought she could come waltzing back into mine. Not this time. The thing is, I almost bought her act. Almost. There was a part of me, the part that still remembered the woman I fell in love with in that little coffee shop on Biltmore Avenue, who wanted to believe she was genuinely sorry, that maybe she'd seen the error of her ways. But then I remembered the bills, the empty accounts, and that hidden joint account with her new boyfriend. I remembered the look on her face when she walked out that night, like she was free at last. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the narrative and paint herself as the victim who just made a mistake. I wasn't the villain in her story. I was the fool who trusted her. Not anymore. So when she showed up that Tuesday morning with her carefully rehearsed apology and her crocodile tears, I let her talk. I let her spill her story about how hard it had been, how she'd been confused, how she missed the life we had. And then I calmly handed her the envelope I'd prepared, the one with the divorce papers I'd already signed, along with a copy of the bank statement she thought I'd never see. Her face drained of color, and for a moment, she stood there speechless. But she recovered fast. Tried to argue, to cry, to beg. I just stood there, arms crossed, let her dig her own hole. When she realized I wasn't going to budge, she switched tactics, tried to guilt me about how this would hurt our kids, how it was my responsibility to make sure they were taken care of. But I'd already set up accounts in their names. I'd already planned for that. I wasn't about to let her use them as leverage. Not again. After she left that morning, I sat alone in the kitchen, listening to the silence that used to be filled with her chatter about meaningless things, sales at the mall, the neighbor's gossip, the new trendy diet she was trying. It hit me then how peaceful it felt. For the first time in years, there wasn't a constant hum of judgment, of dissatisfaction hovering in the air. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stared out the window at the street, watching people go about their lives like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had changed. I wasn't just divorcing her. I was divorcing the version of myself that put up with her lies, her manipulations, her selfishness. A few days later, I met with my lawyer, a no-nonsense woman from Hendersonville named Carla, who didn't mince words. She took one look at the evidence I collected, the bank records, the emails I'd printed out from the shared account she tried to hide, and told me we had everything we needed. She said if my wife tried to fight for spousal support or the house, the evidence would sink her. That was the first time I allowed myself a genuine bitter smile. For once, I wasn't the one caught flat-footed, scrambling to fix the mess. This time I was ready. About a week later, she came back again. This time, she wasn't alone. She brought her mother, who had always acted like I was beneath her daughter, like I should be grateful just to be part of their family. They stood on my porch, trying to project this image of two wronged women, painted faces and designer handbags, expecting me to roll over and beg. Her mother started talking first, her voice syrupy but sharp, saying things about how we were family, how we could work things out for the sake of the kids. I let her speak, but I could see through her performance. They weren't here to mend anything. They were here because they knew I wasn't crawling back. When my wife finally spoke, it was all about the kids, how she didn't want to disrupt their lives, how she wanted us to find a peaceful solution. But I'd already made sure the kids would be fine. I'd already lined up a plan with a family counselor with the school. I told her that. Her mother's face twisted in frustration, but my wife just deflated, her shoulders sagging like she'd finally realized the game was over. She tried one last time to guilt me, but this time her words rang hollow. I just stood there, feeling a calm I hadn't known in years, and told them I'd see them in court. By the time we got to court, her mask was slipping. The confident, smug woman I'd once known was now replaced by someone scrambling to keep her footing, throwing accusations my way as if that would somehow change the facts. She claimed I was unstable, that I'd sabotaged our finances, that I'd hidden assets. But the records told the real story. The hidden accounts, the unauthorized withdrawals, the joint account with her new man. The judge wasn't impressed. My lawyer laid it all out neatly and methodically, showing exactly how she'd planned to gut me financially while painting herself as the victim. Her crocodile tears didn't hold up under cross-examination. When the final ruling came down, it was almost anticlimactic. The house was mine. The accounts were frozen until an equitable split could be determined, minus what she'd already drained. The look on her face was a mix of disbelief and pure rage. But she didn't say a word. She just gathered her papers, avoided my eyes, and left the courtroom with her mother trailing behind her. I stood there, feeling a strange mix of victory and sadness. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt done. I thought that walking out of the courtroom would feel like crossing some kind of finish line, like there'd be this wave of relief or maybe a sense of closure. But as I stepped outside into the crisp Asheville air, all I felt was tired. Bone-deep tired, like I'd been holding up a crumbling wall for years, and now that it was finally gone, I was left standing there with dust on my hands, unsure of what to do next. The drive back to my house was quiet, the hum of the tires on the road filling the silence. I kept waiting for some emotion to hit me, anger, joy, even regret, but all I felt was an odd emptiness. I realized then that the version of myself who had built a life around her, who had sacrificed so much for the sake of us, was gone. I wasn't driving back to a shared home anymore. I was driving back to a house that was finally, unequivocally mine. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat there for a long time, staring at the front door. I thought about the night she'd left, the way she'd packed her things with such a sense of finality, her new man waiting in the car like he was her knight in shining armor. I thought about the months that followed, the nights I spent alone with bills I didn't know how to pay, the mornings I woke up and wondered how I'd ever been so blind. It was funny, in a way. I'd always prided myself on being the dependable one, the one who held things together no matter what, the one who made sure the mortgage was paid, the one who quietly fixed the leaky faucet at midnight because she forgot to mention it. And yet, when it came to the things that really mattered, trust, loyalty, respect, I'd been so spectacularly blind. I went inside and poured myself a drink, something I hadn't done in months. The first sip burned, but I welcomed the sting. It felt honest, in a way that nothing else had for a long time. I sat there in the living room, surrounded by the familiar clutter of my life. Half-finished home projects, a stack of unopened mail, a bookshelf with books we'd picked out together that I no longer cared to read. I thought about calling a friend, maybe heading to the bar downtown to celebrate the end of a chapter. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there and let the silence wrap around me like an old, familiar coat. For the first time in years, I wasn't performing for anyone. I wasn't trying to be the husband she wanted, the son my parents expected, the friend who always had the right thing to say. I was just me. It was a strange feeling to sit there and realize that the person I'd been chasing all these years, the approval, the validation, the love that was never quite enough, had been an illusion. And now that the illusion was shattered, there was nothing left but the raw truth. I was free, not in the way I'd once imagined freedom, with fireworks and celebration. This was a quieter freedom, one that settled in like dust after a storm. It wasn't about being alone. It was about finally being able to hear myself think, to feel the weight lift off my shoulders. It was about knowing that I didn't have to explain myself anymore, not to her, not to her mother, not to the world. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds outside my window, the sun streaming in through blinds I hadn't closed the night before. I made coffee, sat on the back porch, and listened to the quiet. For the first time in what felt like forever, it wasn't suffocating. It was peaceful, and that's when it hit me, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but with a slow, creeping understanding. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter or even sad. I was just done. Done with the lies, the manipulation, the constant scrambling to be enough for someone who decided a long time ago that I never would be. I was done, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. That weekend, I decided to take a drive. Just me, the open road, and a playlist I hadn't touched in years. I ended up outside Hendersonville, winding through the Blue Ridge foothills, no destination in mind, just a need to keep moving. I stopped at a little roadside diner that I remembered from years back, a place where we used to stop on the way to visit her parents. Back then, it was just a pit stop for coffee and pie, a brief pause in a journey I thought we were taking together. This time, I sat in that same booth alone, the vinyl seat cracked and the Formica table worn with years of use. I ordered a black coffee and a slice of whatever pie they had left. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, gave me a nod like she understood something unspoken. As I sat there, I thought about all the small ways I'd lost myself over the years, saying yes when I wanted to say no, keeping quiet to keep the peace, letting her set the terms of our life together. I thought about how I'd justified her coldness, her absences, her little betrayals, because I was too proud to admit that I deserved better. I realized, sitting in that booth, that I'd been measuring my worth by her approval for far too long. And it wasn't just her. It was my parents' expectations, my friends' assumptions, society's quiet pressure to keep things together no matter how broken they were. I'd built a life on foundations that weren't mine, and now that those were gone, I had the chance to rebuild on my terms. The pie was decent, the coffee bitter, but for the first time in years, I tasted them without the weight of performance. It wasn't about impressing anyone or pretending everything was fine. It was just me, a slice of pie, and the understanding that I'd been holding onto a life that wasn't mine for far too long. I drove home that evening with the windows down, the cool mountain air washing over me. The house was quiet when I got back, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt like a blank canvas. There was no one to impress, no one to clean up after. Just me and the knowledge that I was still here, still standing, still breathing. I didn't check my phone for messages from her. I didn't wonder what she was doing or whether she'd change her mind. I didn't care. Not anymore. That night, I started making lists. Not the to-do list she used to leave on the fridge with her perfect handwriting, but lists of things I wanted. Books I wanted to read, places I wanted to visit, new things I wanted to learn. I made a list of friends I'd lost touch with because I'd been too busy trying to hold my life together. I made a list of things I liked about myself, things I'd forgotten in the years of trying to be what everyone else needed me to be. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't making plans for anyone but me. In the weeks that followed, I started reclaiming pieces of my life. Small things at first. A new set of tools to replace the ones she took when she left, a new coffee maker that made better coffee than the one she'd insisted on buying. I replaced the worn-out couch we'd picked out together with something simple, something that fit just me. I started cooking again, not the hurried, half-hearted meals I'd made to keep her from complaining, but real food that I enjoyed eating. I also started reconnecting with old friends, people I'd let drift away because I'd been too busy managing her moods and our fragile, pretend-perfect life. Some of them were surprised to hear from me, others weren't. One friend, an old buddy from high school I hadn't seen in years, told me he'd always wondered what happened to me. I laughed and said I'd wonder the same. But the biggest shift wasn't in the things I bought or the people I called. It was in the quiet moments, mornings with a book and a cup of coffee, evenings spent watching the sunset from my back porch. There was no rush, no need to explain, no performance. It was just life unfolding slowly on my terms. I started going for long walks around Asheville, through the neighborhoods we used to drive through, past the houses we'd once dreamed of owning. I realized I didn't want those houses anymore. I didn't want the big yard or the perfect kitchen. I wanted something simpler, something real. And with every step I took, I felt a little lighter, like I was finally stepping out from under a weight I hadn't even known I was carrying. The funny thing is, I didn't even notice when the anniversary of our split passed. One day, I was walking through downtown Asheville, watching the street performers and listening to a kid play an old guitar, and it hit me. This was the day she'd walked out. The day she served me those papers with her fake ashamed expression and her carefully rehearsed lines. I stood there for a moment, letting the memory wash over me. Then I turned and kept walking. There was no bitterness left, no sting. Just a quiet acknowledgement of a chapter closed. I wasn't the man I'd been that day. Broken, blindsided, scrambling to understand why she'd done what she did. I was someone else now. Someone who could stand still in the middle of a busy street and feel perfectly okay. Later that evening, I sat on my back porch, a glass of bourbon in hand, listening to the night sounds, crickets, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional hoot of an owl. It was simple, it was quiet, and it was mine. I thought about how far I'd come, not in material things, but in clarity. How I'd learned to stop measuring my worth against someone else's expectations. She'd come back, tried to rewrite the story, to turn herself into the misunderstood woman who made a mistake. But I saw through it. I saw who she really was, who we really were, and I let her go. I thought about the lies, the manipulation, the quiet betrayals, and for the first time in years, I felt nothing but peace. And I realized then that peace wasn't something you stumbled into. It was something you fought for day by day, choice by choice, until one day you looked up and realized you'd built it yourself. I didn't tell anyone when I finally filed the last of the paperwork, dissolving the marriage once and for all. There was no fanfare, no announcement, just a quiet drive to the courthouse, a few signatures, a final stamp on a chapter that had defined too much of my life. On the way back home, I pulled over at a spot along the Blue Ridge Parkway, one of those overlooks where the mountains stretch endlessly into the horizon. I got out of the car, leaned against the hood, and just stood there, letting the wind cut through me. I thought about everything, the lies, the betrayals, the quiet betrayals of my own self for years, just to keep things running smoothly. I thought about how I'd convinced myself that being dependable meant being indispensable, that keeping the peace was worth the cost of my own happiness. But standing there, watching the sun set behind the ridges, I realized something simple. I was free not because she left, or because I caught her lies, or because I fought for what was mine. I was free because I'd finally let go of the need to be anyone's savior, anyone's security blanket, anyone's scapegoat. I didn't need her validation. I didn't need to prove anything to her, to my family, to anyone. That night, I drove home in the dark, windows down, air crisp with the scent of pine and wet leaves. The house waited for me, quiet and still. I stepped inside, locked the door behind me, and exhaled a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't a victim. I was just a man who'd finally decided to stop carrying weight that was never mine to bear. And for the first time in a long time, I felt light. And that was enough.